Okay, so team, welcome. Welcome to the first behind closed doors book club for the Thrills and Chills book club. You have all read The First Girl, and I will start by saying very immediately, if you have not read The First Girl, click away now. Watch this video later in time. Do not click past go. Do not collect £100. We will be talking spoilers tonight. So if you have not finished the book, consider this your first warning. I will mention it as we move throughout the evening as reminders. However, Charlie, I'm just over halfway. Dude, tap out. I'm telling you right now, tap out and watch this video later. We will make it available to you later in a playlist on YouTube. Otherwise, we're going to spoil it for you. I'm just saying. Okay, so enough of me waffling on. We are going to bring Claire McGowan, the wonderful author of The First Girl, out here. Let me see if I can find her. Here we go, panelists. Let's get Claire. Here we go. There we are. Okay, welcome Claire to
Hi.
Behind the Closed Doors book club. We started this book club because there are so few places for authors and readers to chat spoilers about their books.
Mhm.
So I guess the first question is, your book aside, how do you feel about spoilers in general?
Well, I was just going to say, actually, I don't really believe in spoilers.
You don't,
Unless
okay,
there's-
okay, so would you say that somebody telling you the end of a book is not a spoiler?
unless it's like unless that's the whole point of the book, that it's like a massive surprise twist.
Okay.
Um, I sort of believe there's like a moratorium on spoilers as well. So when I'm teaching, I always end up talking about different books and I have to kind of
Hmm.
say what happens in them. So I think if it's been out
I,
for a few years, then it's fair game.
yes, I definitely think that there has to be a timeline. If a particularly a film as well, if a film has been out for like 5 years, we're going to talk about the ending.
I do remember when I went to see Titanic, my sister came back and she was, in floods and floods and said to my dad hadn't seen it and she was like, oh, and then Jack died. And dad was like, oh, well, thanks for that. And the boat sank too. What a spoiler. But
Yeah, I mean, Titanic is a tricky one. I'd have to refer your father to a history book or two and be like, hey, look,
yeah,
don't
but I
worry
mean
about
the fate of Leonardo DiCaprio, I guess, as a
it.
fictional
Sure, yes.
character
I think I would be
could not have been
devastated
a yeah.
had I been rooting for Jack the entire
I don't think
time.
my dad cared that much, to be honest, about what
I guess
happened
the
to
real
Titanic.
question is when talking about Titanic is, was there room on the door? Yes.
Well, I think the more pressing question is if you watch it, I watched it not that long ago. If she'd stayed on the lifeboat, which she gets onto and then she gets off,
Yeah.
he probably would have survived because he would have got onto the boat door
The
himself or
the
something
door
else.
himself.
He could have saved himself quite easily, I think, but not both of them. So
Claire,
she
oh my
basically
God, I've
kills
never
him.
thought about that
She
before.
kills him with her impulsive behavior.
I've
Um,
never thought about what would happen if Rose had stayed on the lifeboat. I was
so she
always
takes someone
so
else's place. Like someone else could have been on that lifeboat. Two people she killed.
okay, ever the crime writer, Claire, here you are
Hmm.
immediately. Just checking in the chat box. People say, unless you like spoilers, I don't think I would ever like a spoiler. Will there be another? Amy says, I don't mind spoilers as long as it's expected. It's unexpected spoilers I don't like. Yes.
Yeah, that's fair enough. If it's important to the book, like
Yeah.
some things I don't think are that big of a spoiler.
This will come as absolutely no shock to absolutely anybody, but I'm not a fantasy girly. And this weekend alone, I have seen a lot of spoilers for Onyx Storm. So I know
Yeah.
some people who were like, just, I will not be on the internet whilst reading this book. I feel like when you're really entrenched in a series or something that's really important to you, you definitely want to experience it on your own. You don't want anyone
Hmm.
else to kind of get there before you.
That's true, yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I have a bunch of questions for you. Our readers have a bunch of questions for you. Bethany, to your point, are we asking questions in here or in the Q&A box? Stick them wherever you want. I will find them and I will put them to Claire in the most proactive way possible. So, Claire, obviously, readers, I will say it one more time. If you have not finished the book, we are going to be talking about the ins and outs of the thing. Maybe let's not refer to them as spoilers then. Let's refer to them as the ins and outs of the plot that are revealed as you
Hmm.
read the book. I don't want to take anything away from anybody's reading journey as you read this book. So my personal recommendation would be to leave watch this chat back later. But something that's potentially not a spoiler, Claire, is that this book, out of all of your kind of backlist, you've repeatedly said that it's your darkest book to date.
Yeah, I think
Now
some
that,
of my earlier procedurals were also very dark. So this is kind of the darkest standalone that I've ever done.
Mhm.
Never really written about a serial killer before. So this is the first time for that.
It's so for me, it's definitely dark because it deals with a serial killer, but it's also dark because quite a lot of it, and this is going to sound really strange, quite a lot of it feels so timely and relatable. Like these kind of stories are happening in and around our lives in the
Mhm.
way that true crime and the news and things like that develop. That's what makes this story particularly dark from me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess the question is it as dark as you wanted it to be? Could you make it darker? What would you have to do to make it darker?
I think it is as dark as I wanted it to be because I
Yeah.
wanted it to be to feel real. I think I've read a lot of books that had a really high body count and
Hmm.
it just doesn't feel real. It feels really kind of gimmicky, exploitative. So unless you've sort of taken the time to develop the characters, I just don't think it has that sadness that it needs to have about and the loss. And I wanted Karen's own morals, her guilt to be also quite a grey area. So I think that that came out as I wanted it to. But I ended up having
Hmm.
more humor maybe than I thought. That's just maybe something that I struggle to not include is a bit of humor and a bit of romance as well.
Well, I think that's what makes it more real because as you were saying the last time I spoke to you, it is real life and that's what makes it darker and the fact that there is a little bit of romance in it and there is a little bit of comedy in it, but all these horrific things ha are happening at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose it could have been darker if she'd found the people that she ends up trusting throughout the book, the kind of,
Hmm.
getting back closer to her mother, to kind of making friends with Amelia eventually, and to her kind of romance. If any of those people turned out to not be trustworthy or
Yeah.
to turn on her, I suppose that would have made it a lot darker.
Hmm. So Stu, one of our sleuths, is in the chat box and he says, how do you enjoy true crime yourself? Are you a consumer?
I feel like I watched loads and read loads during the pandemic, like everyone, and then I haven't really watched or read anything for a while now. I read quite a lot when I was researching this, so I was really interested in the girlfriends, the wives of serial killers, and so I read quite a lot of the kind of biographies about them, memoirs about them. Um, so yeah, not since then, I suppose. Yeah, no particular reason for that. If I think if anyone can recommend like a really good documentary podcast book, then I'd be really up for reading that. I'm not a big podcast person. I really liked Serial and West Cork, and apart from that, I've never really found a podcast that I can stick with.
I feel like podcasts are really tricky because of the nature of needing a new episode every, week or whatever.
Hmm.
They do, for me at least, they do veer into the somewhat more exploitative approach to true crime. Like at the very beginning, I used to quite enjoy My Favorite Murder. And then that quite quickly became some of the things that I don't love about true crime.
Yeah,
And
I used to
actually,
listen to
oh,
They Walk Among Us. That was quite good, but I found that
yeah,
it's going to sound really patsy, but I found that the grammar was quite poor in the writing, so that just
okay.
I was kind of mentally correcting it the whole time rather than listening to the actual stories. But some of those were quite interesting. I don't really like the kind of chatty style of podcast. I like it to be
Hmm.
scripted. Um,
I'm trying to think. I've listened to one on West Cork, and I wonder if we've listened to the same one. It's probably the.
I think it was just called West Cork. It was a BBC sound podcast. I think it was really good.
Oh, okay. I've listened to one called West Cork that's on Audible. It's an Audible original,
Mhm.
but that one was really good. When it comes, it's
Maybe it
really
is
hard.
Audible then. Yeah, can't remember.
It's hard when it comes to recommending true crime because what makes good true crime? For me, it is about like, the handling of the facts and whose story is represented, but also some of the true crime that sticks with you the most are the ones where the crime is almost unbelievable.
Yeah.
We were talking a lot in the Readalong chat group about documentaries like Our Father. Did you ever watch that one?
No.
It's about a man who runs a fertility clinic, and rather than helping these couples have children with their own sperm, he is using his. and creating this like cult of children.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's the most kind of heinous crimes that when it comes to documentaries that really stick with you. But to bring it
There
back
was
around,
one I
oh sorry,
watched in
go
the
on.
pandemic was called the it was about the Cecil Hotel one. I forget the name of
Oh
it.
yeah, I haven't seen
That
it,
one
but
made
I
me
know.
sort of think a lot about the ethics of this because it's a really interesting story and setting. It's about this hotel in LA, which has got a really like dark history and lots of like sad things that happened there. And then this in the more modern times, a guest goes missing, but this is a spoiler as well. But like nothing's happened to her. Like it's just an accident.
Hmm.
Pretty obvious right from the start. But then they make a 3, 4 episodes out of all these people speculating.
Yeah.
Was she murdered? Were there ghosts involved? And it's just really stupid. But it's like no, she was having some kind of mental health episode very sadly
Yeah.
and died. And then they did find her. So I felt like that made me a bit
I think
uncomfortable. It's
that
very
speaks
obvious.
to our kind of state of society at the moment in the sense that, oh, there must have been a conspiracy, there must have been something bigger to it, there must have been something wild happening. Whereas, as you said,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it is just the human mind.
And it just felt like people were sort of spinning this whole story out of nothing because they were bored.
Hmm.
And then there was even like a real life man that they decided to pin it on who had absolutely nothing to do with it. And his life was kind of ruined by this.
Yeah, I
So
bet you he's got some stories to tell.
that inspired me a bit with making the kind of brains trust characters.
Yes. Okay, so one character I would like to talk about is Amelia. Um,
Mhm.
Was it intentional that there are kind of two portrayals of victims telling their stories? You've got Karen, who writes the book, and then you've got Amelia, who is the kind of face of this documentary. I don't know how the other readers felt, but it kind of felt like Karen's way of telling her story in this book felt like the right way of doing it. And I wasn't completely sold on Amelia's um, way of retelling her story. But I don't know why I felt that way because technically they are both victims telling their own stories. What
So
was your
Amelia,
kind of,
yeah, she was inspired by this real life person I'd started following on Instagram who survived a serial killer as a teenager.
hmm
She was abducted by a serial killer and she managed to escape from the house when he went to sleep. And she does a lot of content about this. And does a lot of talking about sort of resilience and trauma. And I thought that was really interesting that she was putting it
hmm
all online. So she was a little bit inspired by that person. And I actually came to really like Amelia as a character. She sort of unashamedly uses what's happened to her to build a career, but also for good. And
hmm
I think maybe I started out like Karen, thinking, oh, she's a bit annoying. She's the good victim, she's
Yeah.
displaying her trauma correctly. And I think because people always kind of blamed Karen a little bit, she felt like she wasn't a real victim or she wasn't allowed to say she was a victim.
hmm
So I liked the journey where they ended up actually kind of respecting each other and being friends because they had both really suffered at his hands. And she does have genuine trauma. And I think I came to believe actually, why shouldn't she do what she wants with that? Why shouldn't she process it however she wants and talk about it if it's helping people?
No, exactly.
Even if she puts a kind of internet spin on that, well, why
hmm
should she? So
Sylvia says, I had the same feelings about Amelia. I feel like there's a lot of love for Amelia in these comments. Okay, so the book is told from Karen's point of view. Did you ever think about writing from Aaron's and what might that have looked like?
no, never thought about writing from his POV. Just think that would be so dark to kind of delve into
Hmm.
the mind of someone like that. And I guess ultimately I wasn't really that interested in him. It was more really
Yeah.
about the women around him. I suppose if I'd done anyone else's point of view, it might have been Jen's.
Yeah.
She was an interesting character, maybe some of the other women that were killed.
I like that refocusing that you've kind of managed with this one is that so many crime thriller books will, maybe they'll have a detective character and they'll have the serial killer character and it'll maybe be cat and mouse between the two of them.
Yeah.
And this book is still definitely, it does have a cat and mouse element to it, but it is Karen and Aaron.
Yeah. And I wanted to make clear as well that he's not some kind of fiendish genius. He just
Yeah.
managed to get away with it through various bits of luck and incompetence. And
More and more recently, the kind of true crime content that's created, like I'm thinking particularly of that Jeffrey Dahmer um dramatization. Like serial killers are made far too sexy. like
Yeah,
and
that
turned into
actor.
rock
Yeah.
stars.
Yeah, I mean, the Zac Efron film about Ted Bundy was a great example of that. And that was, I think that was actually based on the memoir I read by Ted Bundy's actual girlfriend, Liz Kendall. She was with him for 4 years and lived with him. And she actually called the police when he did the double murder at Lake Sammamish that day.
Hmm.
She actually thought it might have been him and she called the police. But because the police said, "Oh no, we checked him out, it's not him," then she believed that and she continued to be with him. So I
Yeah.
think he has a very interesting story to tell.
Well, that was clearly like mirrored in Karen calling the police. And one of the questions, I'm sorry, I missed who it was from in the chat box, but someone was asking how important was it that we were unsure about the kind of romantic relationship between Karen and
Yeah,
Aaron?
I saw that question. I was thinking about this. I can't really remember why I made them not a couple. I think maybe because I wanted it to be plausible that she wouldn't have known for sure as well
Hmm.
these things. And I kind of wanted there to be this thing as well where she is kind of desperately in love with him all these years and he's not capable of having a real relationship. So he just sort of keeps her around and he does
Hmm.
care about her, but he's not capable of relating to her in that way. And just the incredible pain of for Karen of realizing this man she's loved her whole life is a murderer and is
Yeah.
deeply broken and evil.
For me, it was, again, it was a kind of testament to another thing that just felt part of Aaron's power. Like
Hmm.
he he knew that she loved him.
Yeah, and he loved
And
her too.
he
And that's why the end happens.
mhm,
He does love her too in his way as much as he's capable.
yeah. And he felt like he was quite happy just to let her love him.
Yeah.
We will talk about the ending. We are going to talk about the ending, but not just yet. We're going to draw it out just a little bit. I would like to talk about Karen a little bit more. I feel like in crime and thriller writing in particular, like women are often given a bit of a, they're often shafted quite a lot. Like we're either victims, we're damsels in distress, or we are crazy to, quote unquote crazy. Karen
Hmm.
has like an unlikability to her. Sometimes I love her, and other points I was like, oh, you're rude and you're annoying. What
Yeah.
was the like, tell me about Karen and how she came to be and what levels of kind of annoying and rude and likable and lovable you wanted her to be.
Yeah, she's very spiky, very
Hmm.
lonely. She doesn't, I mean, of course you would have major trust issues if the
Yes.
one person you ever really loved in your life turned out to be such a monster. And the other person she cared about so much, her best friend, obviously died and she blamed herself for that.
Hmm.
She never really got on with her mother. And that was another thing that I really liked, how her mother came to be actually a really nice character and really like
Hmm.
I saw her very vividly and really she had her faults, of course, but I liked a lot how they kind of rebuilt their relationship. So yeah, she's definitely I definitely don't set out to make my characters likable, and it's been a comment on several of my lead characters in other books that they're not very likable, but I kind of don't I'm not really that interested, I guess, in making them likable as such. I just want them to be interesting and complex. And she's somebody when the book starts who really has nothing. She's very lonely and has nothing in her life.
Mm.
She kept everyone away. She lives in a different country, so it's a little bit of a journey, I suppose, for her to open up and let people in.
Again, like I again, it feels very much just like a reflection on reality. Like humans are complex and flawed and spiky and wild. And in Karen's shoes, I would be rude and spiky too.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
feel
she's
like,
been hounded as well. Like she was hounded. I don't really cover that period of the trial that much, but she was hounded from the country.
hmm.
People blamed her and said, "Oh, you should have known. Like, how could you not have known?" So, so I think it's very plausible that you could sort of suspect, but really don't want it to be true. So
Hmm.
just assume, okay, I'm having these terrible suspicions, but of course they aren't true because it upends your whole life if it is true.
Yeah. And I think to draw that similarity between, was it Ted Bundy that you were saying his girlfriend called the police and the police
Yeah.
said no? It's almost like because the police accepted Karen's decision to call about Aaron as, oh no, you're right. It is Aaron. You must be right. Therefore, you're right. She had the backing of the police with her at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think she's kind of hoping that they'll say, "Oh no, no, it wasn't him,"
Yeah.
just so she can put those doubts. to bed. I mean, in that case of Ted Bundy, like he'd approached a lot of different women that day. So he was literally introducing himself as Ted. So
Hmm.
the girlfriend hears on the news, there's a man called Ted who murdered two women, and he had a car the same color as Ted Bundy's. And there's a lot of evidence there. So she called the police and said, well, maybe it's my Ted. And they were like, oh, no, no, yeah, no, we looked at him already. It wasn't him. So, of course, she believed that when you would, wouldn't you? So,
Yeah. I think that case kind of sounds like that there should be some, further questions into that police procedure. Like, oh, sorry, there's a man called Ted with a blue car and but you've
yeah,
already
like a
cleared this
gold car.
guy?
Yeah, it was quite an
Question.
unusual car too, actually. It was gold. Yeah, I mean, the police messed up massively in that case. Like, they actually
Yeah.
had him, he was actually arrested twice and escaped twice. So, he
Amy
jumped out
says,
of it.
I see Ted Bundy parallels in Aaron. Was that purposeful?
Yeah, although I think he's probably less kind of overtly charming than Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was definitely really interested in the number of mistakes that were made and the way that the police at the time were so willing to believe that this
Hmm.
nice, young, educated man couldn't possibly have done this, and the way that just him being perceived a certain way as like handsome and successful. Actually, in reality, he was neither. Like some people say he was handsome, but other people say he was terrifying and had like
Mm.
black eyes at other times. And he actually wasn't particularly successful, but he was able to sort of spin that just because he was well spoken. The police were like, "Oh, it's definitely not him."
Yeah.
So, dozens and dozens of women died directly because of police incompetence in those cases.
So let's talk about because there are like flashes of police incompetence within the first girl as well. There
Mhm.
is one moment that really sticks with me, and I guess you wouldn't call it incompetence, you would call it maybe coercion. And it's when I think uh, Aaron must be in one room and Karen is in another, and the police officer comes into Karen and says, "Well, he's talked, he's told us everything, so you might as well tell us your version of it now." And I think that's that kind of investigation is quite popular at the moment, is like diving into actually what coercive tactics police are using to get
Yeah.
confessions.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't directly trying to say that the police were incompetent, but I suppose it wasn't necessarily a way that they could have solved that case with everyone.
Hmm.
I just kind of like the way that both Aaron and Karen had known to lie for each other without talking about it because they had this bond and she wasn't really sure, did he lie for me? Did I lie for him? Or was it both?
Hmm.
But
Well,
obviously with the setting in South Yorkshire, you have to think about the Ripper investigation, which was also hugely hampered by terrible mistakes. They had arrested him 9 times and let him go during the course of that investigation.
so there's a history to think about as well.
Yeah. Well, that was West Yorkshire, but still Yorkshire.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Karen's other relationships. Like the crime thrillers tend to fall into one of two categories. You're either following a detective or you're following a kind of amateur sleuth in whatever form that might take. But actually,
Mhm.
you bring them together and you kind of have them working together because they sort of need each other.
Yeah.
But then there is also this will they, won't they, almost romantic subplot there. And there's, potentially with the head of the podcasts as well, and some other characters who have romance kind of subplots woven in. Do you think
Hmm.
that that just comes naturally again because you were reflecting the reality of life?
I love a romance, so I kind of can't really avoid it. It just sort of seems to creep in. And I kind
So
of
for
wanted to
people,
give her a reason to stay in Yorkshire as well.
so for people in the chat box who don't know, Claire has obviously written a huge backlist of crime thrillers, which we all know and love, but she also writes romance fiction as well. So if you love those elements of The First Girl, then Claire has other books for you to dive into. And also,
Yeah,
Claire, you have written true crime as well. So
just one true crime so far. Yeah.
I'm I'm gonna get it for my flight to Ireland on Sunday. I'm excited. Yes,
Yes,
So
it's
Juliana's question is under the same name. Yes, everything is under the same name, right?
my romance is under the name Eva Woods. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
EVA or AVA?
EVA. Yeah,
Perfect. Okay,
Eva.
now watch everybody rush to go and buy your romance books.
Pretty much all of my crime has some romance in it too.
Mhm.
I quite like so.
Well, I think some of the books that we read last year definitely kind of What You Did and Let Me In. have those more domestic elements to it as well,
Yeah.
which were great. I think Let Me In might be my favorite, but maybe vying top place for this one at the moment out of the ones that we've done.
Mhm.
Okay, so other questions. The title "The First Girl" is brilliant, and now that we've read the book, we know that this could be applied to Jen or Karen. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, it was my first title. It was my working title, so I was really happy that it got kept. You know, sometimes titles do get changed, so I was pretty happy, and it kind of plays into this idea of victims being enumerated. You know, she was that girl, she
Mhm.
was this girl, she was that girl, and a little bit dehumanized. So I guess
Yes.
it is Jen really, but yeah, it's also kind of Karen in the sense of whether or not she considers herself one of his victims. And although he never hurt her, he did sort of break her heart and ruin her life and
Mm.
get her blamed for his crimes. So,
I think you're so right. When you watch any kind of fictional crime TV show and they're kind of stood in front of their war room and they've got their board up, there is always, oh, victim number seven, da da da
yeah.
da 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 da, victim number four, blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
And it's never, you know, Sarah, Karen, Jen, Angelina, blah blah blah.
Yeah. And there's quite a lot in the book about trying to recover their names and what they were like.
There's a sentence that I'm now going to completely forget, but I loved it. It was something like, um, it's when Karen is talking about the Bagman book, and it's about, I can't remember whether she's talking to Aaron in that way that she does, but she talks about how she wants to breathe life back into the girls. I
Yeah.
can't remember the exact sentence, but I thought that was so brilliant. I remember underlining that one in my Kindle.
And she feels a terrible responsibility as well that she got to live and they didn't, but yet she's not really done anything with her life. She's just kind of run away from everyone.
Hmm. Okay, I have two questions left on my list. So team, if you have more questions in your chat box,
Yeah, I
and
think there were some more earlier on.
let me have a quick look at the Q&A, make sure I'm not missing
Mhm.
anything here.
Some in the chat box as well.
Sylvia, that definitely is done. We've talked about that one. So one of the questions, and this is kind of, I don't know whether I would call it a spoiler and I would call it a reveal. But as I've said multiple times, readers, if you're here, then you should be fine with us exploring this question. The question is, who really killed Jen in your mind?
Um, I don't know. I think yeah, I think it was Aaron. I think because Karen probably she didn't really have the strength to do it. And
Hmm.
she was angry, but she's not a murderer.
Yeah.
Um, but on the other hand, you know, you can kill people quite easily. Like some people, apparently to some people, just because of the anatomy of their necks are much easier to strangle than others. So some people would survive a brief struggle,
Okay.
and people wouldn't. So, which is actually a plot point in the Anne Moriarty's book, The Husband's Secret. If anyone
Okay.
likes the Anne Moriarty, I'm a big fan. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to leave it a little bit ambiguous. Like the guilt
Hmm.
is always going to be there a bit. So
And I like that Karen doesn't know either.
yeah.
Like that felt like important. And uh, even though, she has kind of been through a journey in this book, that piece of information is still a little bit
Oh yeah.
undone for her.
Did he just say that to spare her guilt, or
Yeah.
is it true?
Okay, so a couple of questions keep coming up about the same thing. Question was asked at the very beginning, will there be another book with a reinvestigation into the girl married to the policeman?
No,
And would
it's
Matt and the
already
team investigate
no, I don't because it's already been solved, so I don't think
it?
there's
Hmm.
to, to say about that really. I don't often have sequels or recurring characters, except for I have this one detective character who keeps popping up and who is a very major character in the one I'm writing at the minute, so my next book.
Okay,
So
what can you
occasionally
share?
people recur, but usually they're just standalones.
I quite like the idea of recurring characters, but it's not a series. Like I
Not
like
a
the
series,
idea of
yeah, but
like a
they just kind of
universe. It's
it's
a
in the same
world that
world, yeah.
exists. Yeah. Lisa Jewell does it in a very small way where occasionally she'll have a character walk past a cafe that's in the last one or something. And I love that that feels, it's almost like the Marvel universe, but
Yeah, so
for,
I actually have set three of my books in the same fictional town, and the books are all different genres. So unless someone is like a huge fan of mine and has read everything I've ever written, they probably wouldn't notice that. So it's just like a little fun Easter egg for me that there's this town I invented that.
Do you want to tell us which books they are so we can go and read them?
Yeah, so it's let me think. Well, one of them is one of my Eva Woods books, which is called The Man I Can't Forget.
Hmm.
One of them is my literary book, This Could Be Us, which is under my own name, but is more
Hmm.
literary crime. And then it's What You Did is the other one. Yeah, a more
Okay.
kind of thriller.
I like that. Again, it feels quite real. All of these stories might be happening in the same town.
Yeah. So it's like a
Like,
suburban town. It's called town's called Bishop Bridge, and there's no crossover in terms of characters, but they just all kind of happen in the same imaginary place. So
yeah. Okay, I love the little insight into world building like that.
hmm.
Um, okay, Amy says, why did Aaron make that final decision that he made? Was that always his plan?
No, he wanted to save Karen. His initial plan was to escape, and he
Hmm.
had this kind of long running plan, and he saw a way to use her return and this disappearance of this other girl, which has nothing to do with him really. He saw a way to use that to his advantage, but ultimately he saw that she was in danger and he couldn't leave her to her fate, so he kind of sacrificed himself for her.
I think one question that I would like to ask is how much do you know about these people that doesn't make it into the book? Like when people ask you, like, oh, what was the motivation for that or this or that or the other? Some people can say, oh, when this character was 14, this happened and that led to this and led to that. But then obviously you only have, 450 pages to kind of get the story across. Where do you draw the line?
So I don't really ever do any conscious character building, and I don't write anything down about their pasts.
Okay.
But if asked, I probably would know, I think. So
And you think it would be quite an intuitive answer.
yeah.
You would just know them.
Yeah.
That's wild. I know some authors who like go really in on the character building and they do like character hot seating where they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I know what your coffee is and I know what your perfume is, but that's never going to become relevant to the story.
Yeah, I mean I could probably tell you that for Karen, but I just don't I kind of like to get to know them a bit as if they're real people. It just
Yeah.
especially with their names, that always just comes to me, and
Hmm.
I really hate changing the name after I've figured out what it is. So it's all very organic for me.
Yes, you told me this actually. So this is a sneak preview for our Super Sleuths YouTube video readers, which will come out later on this week. Amelia was originally Amelia with an A, and you decided
Yeah.
that you couldn't do that anymore.
Oh, I didn't decide. I was told.
Oh, sorry.
I was told there were too many characters who started with an A, which is probably true because I had Arlene and I had Ashley, who's Jen's dad, and someone else I
Aaron.
can't remember. Um, so yeah, probably made sense, but I didn't really like doing it, even though it was only one letter different. So
I think you probably could have got away with it. Last week I had to read a book and there were two characters. One was called Mick and one was called Mark.
oh
And I was like, look, that is too similar.
yeah. I can't remember who the fourth character was, but there was definitely a fourth character with an A as well.
We can do this. So you've
Mhm.
got Ashley, Aaron,
Arlene. Oh, Aaron,
Arlene.
yeah, that was it. Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
that was
thank
it.
you.
Okay.
I forgot about him. Yeah. So,
I
yeah.
mean, I know we don't want to focus on him, but we do have to count him in this name.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I think in that case we are coming to the end. I feel like we've rattled through all of the questions, unless anybody has any
There's
last
some more
ones.
that we missed. Let me
Where
see.
have I missed?
Mm, question about which character in the story came to you first? That was Carla's
Oh,
question.
perfect.
I think probably Karen. I think the idea came out of it's a story about a woman whose ex slash is he even her ex is a serial killer,
Hmm.
and what that's like. So being the first girl, obviously a real killer. So that was very much the germ of the idea for this one, and then the rest of it was kind of built around it. And then as always with everything I write, I spent a little bit of time figuring out how to tell it, so what the structure was going to be, and I
Hmm.
always do different structures for every book and try different narrative approaches. So in this one, it was just first person, but every chapter starts with an extract. So I was really struggling about how to do the backstory, like all the stuff when they were at school. I just didn't want to
Hmm.
do extensive flashbacks. So in the end, I kind of decided just to gloss over a fair bit of that. I just didn't find, I don't know, I just didn't find that it was like narratively that interesting.
Hmm.
Happened, people know what happened. She died, so I didn't want to spend loads of time in the past, and that seemed like a good way of summarizing it.
I think there was a lot of love for the format in the DM groups, and I know that readers love a kind of book within a book, or they love
Yeah,
books
I do
about
too.
authors. So that concept of getting a sneak peek into this book that actually doesn't, exist. Um, and we sent out the press release, and we sent out some extract of those little chapter samplers that Cameron writes. So we did kind of like play up to that, which was quite fun. Oh,
Uh,
okay. I
Question
was going
about
to say,
research there as well. Did you need to
yeah.
do a lot of
So I
research?
was,
Yeah, so I did research quite a lot of sort of serial killer narratives and their wives, their partners, and Maxine Carr was another sort of inspiration, the girlfriend of Ian Huntley, and how
Mhm.
she did actually lie to help him, and she didn't know what he'd done, but he sort of asked her to lie, and she did, and then she ended up, absolutely pilloried. She had to have plastic surgery because people would have killed her. They were so angry at her, and she didn't kill
Mm.
anyone. She protected him. She probably didn't believe that he'd done anything, and he was probably also quite coercive to her. So that was interesting. I watched some documentaries about her and some dramas.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because I feel like even though she didn't murder anybody, you want victims' names to be made public and that so they can get as much support as they want, as they need rather. But at the other hand, you're also then vilifying them for their involvement, and then suddenly she can't do anything, and that's because her name will follow her everywhere.
Yeah, and then some people also feel like, well, why should she get to, she served a short prison sentence, now she's out, she's living her life, she's got a child, what, should she be allowed to do that? But I kind of feel a bit like if anyone else was in that situation, if your living partner says, "Oh, I didn't do it. Can you just like give me an alibi or something?" You might be
Mm.
tempted to. I understand that thought process. You don't think that they obviously she didn't believe that he would kill two young girls. Like
Yeah, of
who
course.
would believe that of their partner?
Hmm.
Um. So yeah, I had to do it's quite a lot of stuff in this book about police procedure. It's pretty stretching what would happen, as some people have noticed. Um. So I kind of just had to like find ways to make that work.
Hmm.
True that she would probably in real life not be allowed this level of access to the investigation, but I kind of wanted it to be that they were just a bit at their wits' end and really strapped for
Hmm.
cash, so that if she could help, they would let her.
I think when you're writing crime fiction, you could adhere to much of the actual, real life procedure as much as possible, but sometimes you need to play with a little bit of artistic
Yeah, so I
licensing to
do
make
always
it.
get it checked. And then in this case, my police contact was like, "Yeah, this is not at all right." So I did change it quite a bit. And then I was like, "Okay, but how can I make this like kind of right?" So he did help me quite a bit, but he was a bit like, "Yeah, this is completely wrong. So you have to change all of this." So
It's got to be a careful balance, right? You need a
yeah.
little bit of both to make it work. Okay, so there is one question that keeps coming up, and I wasn't going to ask because I feel like we need to respect the mystery around it, but it is about the symbol. Tell us about the
Yeah.
symbol.
So I don't know what it looks like. I'm not a very visual person, so I don't really picture it. Um, but what's interesting is that quite a few serial killers did do this. They did leave
Hmm.
symbols at the scene. Also the Zodiac killer, Peter
Hmm.
Jay as well, had his own little logo that he used to leave at scenes. And there were other killers as well who did do this who were never caught. So it is plausible that someone would do this. It has happened.
Do you think
Uh,
they do it for kind of it is that rock star, almost like calling card notoriety vibe?
Yeah, they're playing with the police, I think, and
Mm.
trying to make themselves famous and enjoying the notoriety.
I think I liked with Aaron that it was another marker that people could have been seen to have said that they missed.
Yeah,
Like there were markers in his behavior or certain things that he did or said or
yeah. I
having
feel
a
like in the 90s, people used to draw a lot more. I don't know if people still do this at school, but people were always drawing little symbols and things on
Mhm.
their notebooks at school. So kind of
I feel like
visual.
if you are around maybe 25 to 35 and you went to school in the UK, then there is a very particular like bubble writing of the letter S. that
Yeah.
everybody knows. And yeah, see, Aisha in the chat box is like, yes, the S.
Yeah, I
Everybody
know what
knows what
that
that
is.
is. Like,
Yeah, and I'm older than 35, but yeah, so people would draw like musical clefs and kind of
hmm
versions of that and different yeah, it was just a really common thing to do, like doodle on your school books. I guess
I
there
think
was
it's
something like
interesting
that.
that you don't even know what it looks like. Even that mystery
No,
trip.
I have a vague, I mean, I'm not just not a very visual person to be honest, so I can't really
So
don't
does
have like
that
a
mean when you
strong
think about, your characters, like when you think about what Karen looks like, do you not kind of conjure a person or an actress or anything like that?
No, I don't think I do. No, I just have a sense of what she's like. Some characters more than others, I have a sense of what they look like. So, like
hmm
Arlene, her mother is quite vivid, sort of always smoking and has like dyed red hair, and always wearing tight clothes. So I had a good sense of what she looked like. And Amelia, I had a good sense of what she looked like. Also, she's kind of Asian, American Asian,
hmm
always wearing athleisure. Not
Which
Karen,
fits
but
kind of like in that internet vibe, doesn't it?
yeah, she's very Stanley Cup, Amelia. That's a good vibe.
Yes.
So I had a good sense of her, and I guess had a quite good sense of Jen as well. So it just depends. Mm.
Interesting. I like that you write intuitively about your characters rather than, doing this massive character study first. It feels, again, very just reflective of real life.
It does make it quite hard to do sequels or a series though. When I was writing my series, I was always having to think, oh, did I ever say when their birthday was or
hmm
what color their eyes were, and having to sort of sit down and work out very laboriously how old everyone was and when their birthday was and all of that kind of thing. So not my strong point.
I can't remember who I was talking to. I was talking to another author recently, and they were saying that every time they mentioned something dated, like, oh, 2 weeks ago, or oh, that was 5 years ago, they had to
Yeah.
write that in a separate document
Oh yeah,
so
I'm
that
really bad at
they
that.
kept,
Yeah.
that sounds just quite logistically taxing.
Yeah, so I'm really good at spelling and grammar, so I don't make mistakes with that. And
hmm
sometimes I get corrected and I am actually right and the copy editor is wrong. That's happened a few times. But I really make a lot of mistakes with timelines, continuity, someone standing up, sitting down. Like I really struggle to keep track of like where people are in a scene, who's sitting down, who's not sitting down, where are they,
Right.
and things like that. So I'm not great at that.
Okay, so we're all now going to be looking out for those elements. Like we know that your spelling is going to be
Yeah.
fine, but we're going to
I
be
mean,
looking out.
it does get checked repeatedly by different people, so hopefully most of
hmm
it gets caught. But I actually see mistakes in books all the time, so stuff does get through.
Definitely. I was reading a book the other day and someone, I don't know how it was missed, someone had left like an orphan chapter, copy and pasted
Oh no.
later in the book. I had to write an email and be like,
Yeah.
just so you know.
The biggest thing I see come check a lot now is homonyms. So not homonyms, sorry, homophones. So words that sound the same spelled differently. So it doesn't
Okay.
flag as a spelling mistake, but it's still a mistake. So like
Oh, so
the
like
word
peek and
grizzly.
peek.
Yeah, so like grizzly murders, that's spelled SLY, but I see it often spelled with two Z's. Like that's the type of bear. So that's
Yeah.
a common kind of one, but it wouldn't flag as a spelling mistake, but definitely
Well,
wrong.
that's a very good point. I always have to catch myself on sneak peek.
Mm,
It's you're getting a peek with your eyes. You're
yeah,
not getting a peek of the mountain.
yes.
That one's always
Piquing and
tricky.
piquing your interest is an entirely different type of peak as well. So
Yeah, exactly. Jesus,
mm.
let's not.
And I'm sure no one cares about that except me. I'm just weird.
Well, I mean, I'm sure your copy editors are very pleased that you are very strict and you know
Well, I'm
exactly
good at
what you're
that, but I'm
doing.
not good at the other stuff, as I said. So.
Aisha says, I feel like Aaron would have preferred his nickname to be linked to the logo. The bagman is a very uncool persona. Love that it probably would have annoyed him.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's just not a very cool nickname.
There was definitely some chat in the DM groups about the fact that it was like Tesco's and Sainsbury's bags. Like we
Yeah.
just couldn't not picture those bags anymore when we were reading this one.
Yeah, it's a really horribly brutal way to kill someone, isn't it? Like just
Mm.
so like degrading as well.
And those plastic bags are thick as well, so you do not stand a chance.
Yeah, so I wanted it to be clear, hopefully, that even though he does kind of care for Karen, he's just a
Still a
monster.
monster.
Not a monster. I
Yeah.
don't really believe that people are monsters, but he's just like yeah, disgusting person. Like he's not
hmm
glamorous or clever or brilliant. He's just brutal. And he doesn't really know why he's doing these things. It's just a compulsion that he has, and
hmm
maybe even kind of wanting to be caught. I think some killers do want to be caught deep down and stopped.
hmm especially when they start to. I'm actually reading I'll Be Gone in the Dark at the moment.
Oh yeah, that's a great
Um,
one.
and there's a bit at the beginning where they talk about very organized killers and how when organized killers kind of devolve and want to be caught, they'll start doing, silly things like they'll leave the screwdriver out,
Yeah.
or, they'll become less organized, and it's because they want to be caught because their mission is complete or whatever.
Yeah. The crazy thing about that case is everyone always had this belief that serial killers don't just stop, and if they do stop, it's because they're in prison or they've died or they're married or something like that. And in that case, nothing had happened. He just stopped. He was married, I think, but that doesn't always stop them, of course. But yeah,
Hmm.
he stopped for decades, so it was crazy. Yeah,
Almost
every
felt a bit like a game.
yeah, they kind of assumed they just assumed he must be dead or he's in prison because he has stopped and he'd killed
Hmm.
dozens of people before that. He actually was multiple serial killers. That's how many different people he killed. They thought there were several different people,
Hmm.
and it was all him. So terrifying book. Yeah, it's really scary to read with get up and check all your doors after.
This is the second time of me trying to read this. The first time I tried to read this is when I was living on my own. And I was
Yeah.
like, nope, I need to put that one back and come back to it at
Oh, I
another
read it when I was
point.
living in California and I was staying in an apartment.
Jesus, okay.
Like the balcony was sliding doors, and then those doors really did not lock very well. So that was quite scary because that's how we got into a lot of people's houses. Yeah.
God. Okay, well, on that note,
Hmm.
Aisha's recommending I'll Be Gone in the Dark with audio. I don't know,
Yeah,
I feel like,
I wonder who reads it. Does Michelle read it herself? Well, she died before it came out, I think. So
yeah, yeah, that's a good question. Maybe, no, it wouldn't be Patton Oswalt, would it? I'll Google it. We'll find out.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, she didn't. I don't think she ever knew that it was sold either, did she? So
No, I think that's one of the saddest things about the book is that I think Patton Oswalt finished it for her. And then, there was the documentary and everything else after she had already passed.
yeah, and then it was solved. I think not long after that, a couple of years later.
Hmm.
So
Well, listen, thank you so much, both readers and Claire, for coming and
thank
hanging
you.
out with us this evening. Claire, I know you have a strict 7:30.
No, that's okay. I mean, I could do one more if anyone has another question they might
Does
like to ask.
anyone have any last questions for Claire before we let her go? I secretly want to ask you about your next book. You mentioned
Oh
that.
yeah, so I'm actually just finishing it off. I finished it off this week, and I'm just redrafting. So at the moment, I think I probably will stay keep this title. This is quite a good crime title. It's called The Other Couple.
Ooh, okay.
It's about a couple that go on holiday to a kind of nice resort in Tenerife, and they're having a lot of problems in their marriage. This is supposed to be a make or break holiday, and they make friends with another couple while they're there, and they're not really sure why these people want to be friends with them because they're like much younger, much cooler. While they're there, another woman is killed, a local woman is killed, and the husband of the first couple is found with the body, so he gets arrested.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of about I've tried to do something really tricksy with the format where it's told from the point of view of the wife of the first couple and also Alison, my detective, who has
Hmm.
popped up in some other books. If anyone's read The Other Wife, she was in that. She's
Hmm.
also in The Push. So I kind of was quite fond of her and wanted to. She's pregnant in this book, so she's on holiday also in the same resort, and she's just really bored. She's pregnant. She can't drink. She can't do anything. She's super fed up having to
And then a
relax.
murder just falls into her lap.
Yeah, so she becomes a bit of a busybody, even though she has no jurisdiction in Spain. And so the first half is her in the her on holiday and the wife of the couple once they've come home, and then it swaps over. So you get the perspective of the wife back in Spain, and then Alison in the present day, heavily pregnant and racing against time to solve this case. When is it out? That's a really good question. I don't know when it's out.
So,
Probably, I would guess probably early next year.
mhm.
Because this one isn't out yet. This one comes out on February 18th. So probably this one is yeah going to be early next year, I think. But yeah, how far ahead we always work in commercial
How
fiction.
exciting. Awesome. All right, team. Listen, thank you so much for
Great.
coming to
Thank you
hang
all
out
for your
this
questions.
evening. Thank you,
Yeah.
Claire, so much coming to hang out.
Thank you,
Like
Lex.
no, you're welcome. Thank you. And there will be a bunch of reviews up on the hashtags after the first girl read along. So that's it. Sleuths and read alongers, thank you so much for joining
Yeah, I'm
us.
going to record
And
a little another video as well to answer the last few prompts myself because people seem to enjoy that. So
perfect. So readers, keep an eye out for that on
yeah.
Claire's Instagram. And the next thing that you'll see from us is the Super Sleuths YouTube video, which will come out on Thursday, which will feature Claire. And that will wrap up the first case in the Thrills and Chills book club. So, Claire, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Talk soon.